truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Monday, November 4th, 2024, the 1,384th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the free version on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by checking the show notes or by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin. And you feel better about precious metals? I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company. And that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. All right, so on Friday, we discussed Nate Silver, an article about the great Nate Silver from the polling analysis firm 538, talking about how he thought polling companies were cheating because they all showed roughly the same numbers each time out. He thought there was data manipulation going on. He said, you're cheating, you're hurting. These can't be real legitimate polls because there are never any outliers. He admitted that polls were being used as narrative devices, but then analyzed them as though they weren't and suggested there are a number of polls you can trust despite having the same problem, always showing this very, very close race. Polls can be used as narrative devices to drive narratives while not reflecting any reality, any circumstance attached to reality prime, but that some were kinda okay. I mean, what are you gonna do? Not have polls? I guess the takeaway is that polls can be used as narrative devices, and in fact, some, maybe even many, are, but there are other polls that are not being used as narrative devices. At least they're not set up to be narrative devices. They're set up to be real polls, and then they just happen to be used as narrative devices, but they're still real. So some polls are real, according to Nate Silver. How do you know which one the real ones are, having read Nate Silver's analysis? It's the ones that are sometimes subject to outliers. That's how you can know that real numbers are being used. And so with that in mind, let's go to the Des Moines Register on Saturday. Iowa poll. Kamala Harris leapfrogs Donald Trump to take lead near Election Day. Here's how. Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump in Iowa, a startling reversal for Democrats and Republicans who have all but written off the state's presidential contest as a certain Trump victory. A new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll shows Vice President Harris leading former President Trump 47-44 among likely voters, just days before a high-stakes election that appears deadlocked in key battleground states. The result follows a September Iowa poll that showed Trump with a 4-point lead over Harris and a June Iowa poll showing him with an 18-point lead over Democrat President Joe Biden, who was the presumed Democrat nominee at the time. It's hard for anybody to say they saw this coming, said pollster Ann Selzer, president of Selzer & Co. She has clearly leaped into a leading position. Well, Ann Selzer, it's not hard for anybody to say they saw this coming. I've been talking about this scenario for months and months and months. Now, who knows how it will play out? I don't know that that's the scenario that will emerge in reality. But if you know that elections are narrative battles, if you know that elections are fake, if you believe that there is full control, and you are therefore expecting the pursuit of an ideal outcome, you got to think, what's the ideal outcome? I have suggested, who knows how many times, that the ideal outcome is that the TV says Kamala won by a zillion votes. We've had 2/3 of the country that understands that rigging and cheating and manipulation affected the outcome of 2020. They won't be confused about what happens if the TV tells them Kamala won by a jillion. Kamala supporters won't admit it, but they would understand the same thing. You would have to be absolutely sheltered in the tiniest of tiny bubbles to think Donald Trump isn't much more popular now than he was in 2020. Or to think that Americans are pleased with the job done by the fake President Joe Biden and the fake Vice President Kamala. They wouldn't admit it, but they would know. And it's not just that they would know, it's that they know from last time. They know deep down that Joe Biden didn't receive 81 million real lawful American votes. They don't care about that. They professed a belief that masking and social distancing work. They professed a belief that Biden won, that the summer of love was entirely justified and that they were solving racism, that the very violent insurrection was a terrorist attack against the country by all Trump supporters led by Donald Trump. They sided with Ukrainian Nazis and promoted a World War III over the paragliding go-kart incident. There are people who will believe whatever the television tells them to believe. We are not going to reach these people by sending them links and sources and teaching them about facts. They're going to have to be jarred out of it, if they can be jarred out of it at all. But that doesn't represent some majority of the population. That represents a very small percentage of the population. Maybe that portion of people could profess a belief that the elections are legitimate, even if we are told that Kamala Harris has won by a bazillion votes. But no one else is going to believe that. And even if they have doubts, they're not going to stand up and fight to say that elections are legitimate after seeing a result like that. Everyone else would immediately know that our elections are rigged, and they are rigged. And that is a critical understanding. These elections in this country are not capable of conveying the will and consent of the people to be governed. And if there is a fix to be had, that understanding is required. If there is another way to get to that understanding that I am missing, that involves Trump winning a real election tomorrow by a lot, fine, all good. I want the ideal outcome, and I think that we should pursue that. And there could be one of those that I just have not thought of. I am totally open to that possibility. And we've talked about some possibilities that may lead in that direction. If the reporting of election results is delayed for 10 days or 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, while people dig through all of the election evidence, or maybe we're presented 2020 results for the first time, all good. I just want to get there. I don't care about being right about how we get there. I'm trying to cover all possible bases so that when we reach this next phase, when whatever it is revealed, we will be in the best possible position to respond, understanding a zero trust environment and the fog of war in front of us and all around us that never goes away and may never go away. Now, if a massive Kamala win is going to happen, if it's going to come out of nowhere, then you have to be able to seed that narrative too, or else no one will believe it immediately. And from that perspective, it's not hard at all to see polls like this coming. A poll that suggests Kamala Harris could win the state of Iowa, a strong Trump state. But to be clear, it was also a state where the governor was a Ron DeSantis supporter, so take that as you will. Was it all kayfabe? Or is Kim Reynolds just another uniparty rhino? Perhaps we'll find out. But if you want to sell a major Kamala victory, you have to suggest to the country that it's possible for Kamala Harris to defeat Donald Trump in some places that have always been considered Trump's home territory. And the reality of elections doesn't matter here at all because this is narrative stuff. The goal for the regime is to maintain people's trust in our election systems, or even get them to re-up on that trust, knowing that all they have to do is weather 4 years of Donald Trump, fill out state governments with uniparty members, install uniparty members in the House and Senate. We've talked at long length about how that is their best strategy, but that strategy is impossible to pull off if it is reported that Kamala Harris won by a lot. And it's impossible after you have pounded into the heads of the population at large that this has been a close race from the very, very beginning, if you don't at least tell them it's possible that Kamala might have the greatest election day ever. All of a sudden, something just happens there at the end and everyone decides Kamala Harris, she's our girl. If she can't put her head down and get to work, no one can. Well, at least according to her husband, Doug Emhoff, who pointed this out yesterday.
Kamala did what Kamala always does. She just put her head down and she went to work.
And of course, he's correct about her work ethic. That is actually why she is the fake vice president right now. So is there anything that's happened here at the end that has pushed people toward Kamala? Trump is Hitler, literally Hitler, didn't work. Trump groped a girl next to Jeffrey Epstein 31 years ago. Didn't work. Trump's doing a Nazi rally. Didn't work. Kamala has Beyonce. Kamala's making her closing argument on the ellipse, creating a counterpoint to Donald Trump's dark speech with which he provoked the very violent insurrection, and Kamala is calling for unity. Didn't work. At the end of last week, they tried to say that Trump suggested a firing squad for Liz Cheney. That's not what he suggested. He suggested that she might have a different outlook on war if she was over there in the midst of one. And yesterday they claimed that Donald Trump was suggesting the mass murder of journalists, as he pointed out that if an assassin were to try him at his rally yesterday, they would end up having to shoot through the press because he was protected at every other angle. He's not allowed to joke about his own assassination events now. But none of these communist freakouts and press panics have done anything to change the tenor of the fake election campaign. No one is going to punish Donald Trump at the voting booth because the TV is saying he said mean things for the 9th year in a row. No one who has woken up in the past 4 years to understand that the government is basically trying to kill us and is happy to censor us and violate not only our constitutional rights, but our human rights, making it quite clear that they're not interested in our votes. No one who's reached that understanding is going to change their mind at the last minute and then vote for Kamala at the last minute. And if they did, it wouldn't matter anyway because it's not a real election. It just matters whether or not people will actually believe that something swung all these voters at the last minute. And none of the stories in the media right now have that quality to them. There also happen to be a range of GOP establishment narratives and schemes for the future that are not aided by attacking Donald Trump, at least not now. After the election, of course, I imagine the attacks against Trump and his supporters will reach an all-new level, but they've kept their powder dry until the fake election day has passed. So it's very hard for the anti-Trump contingent in the Uniparty to get much breathing room, narratively speaking, while the GOP establishment is still backing Donald Trump, or at least not going full-on anti-Trump. So there has been no luck in moving the needle away from Donald Trump over these past few weeks. We saw what their attempted October surprises were. They didn't surprise anyone. They were old news. No one cared. And there's nothing that has made Kamala Harris more appealing. So what can you do? You can simply tell the people all the polls before were wrong. Now we've discovered which polls are right. Let's get back to the Des Moines Register. The results come as Trump and Harris have focused their attention almost exclusively on 7 battleground states that are expected to shape the outcome of the election. Neither has campaigned in Iowa since the presidential primaries ended, and neither campaign has established a ground presence in the state. A victory for Harris would be a surprising development after Iowa has swung aggressively to the right in recent elections, delivering Trump solid victories in 2016 and 2020. The polls show that women, particularly those who are older or who are politically independent, are driving the late shift toward Harris. You got that? Older women and independents are going toward Kamala Harris right now. And why? Because they're scared of Trump after 9 years and because of abortions. You know how old women and independents love their abortions. Age and gender are the 2 most dynamic factors that are explaining these numbers, Selzer said, claiming to have polled 808 likely voters in Iowa. The article says independent voters who had consistently supported Trump in the lead up to this election now break for Harris. That's driven by the strength of independent women who back Harris by a 28-point margin, while independent men support Trump but by a smaller margin. Similarly, senior voters who are 65 and older favor Harris, but senior women support her by a more than 2-to-1 margin, while senior men favor her by just 2 percentage points. I like her policies on reproductive health and having women choosing their own health care, and the fact that I think she will save our democracy and follow the rule of law, said Linda Marshall, a 79-year-old poll respondent from Cascade who has already cast her absentee ballot for Harris. The registered Democrat said she identifies as pro-life, but doesn't think anyone should be able to make that choice for somebody else. I just believe that if Republicans can decide what you do with your body, what else are they going to do to limit your choice? For women, she said. And the poll goes on and on. Isn't it amazing that the decisive factors are going to be exactly what they have always been for 9 years, according to the television? Soon we will hear about a great racism and how minority voters broke for Harris at the last minute. Oh, Donald Trump said that thing about assassins having to shoot through the press, and that turned 46 million voters in Kamala Harris's favor at the last minute. They all went out and voted on Election Day in person. Those brand new Democrats who used to be Republican and waited until Election Day to vote. But by Election Day, they were no longer Republicans. They heard a few things that Donald Trump said and decided that once again he was a Nazi, and they broke Harris last minute. 46 million late-breaking Kamala Harris voters. CNN has an electoral college map featured prominently on their page. 7 yellow states indicating where the battlegrounds are. Their webpage, as it displays on mobile, actually has an early vote tracker that just keeps ticking up over time. Ooh, look at all these votes that have come in. It is already right now at 78.4 million votes. That's how many early votes we've had. I wonder what sort of astronomical total will be reported tomorrow. Will it be around what it was for many cycles, somewhere in the 120 to 130 million range? Will it be 158 million as was reported in 2020? A totally ridiculous, impossible number that should tip everyone off to the fact that our elections are irredeemably broken and fake in the first place, but didn't? Or will it be something even more extraordinary? I'm hoping for 180 million total votes. Trump's been saying that he has 250 million Americans supporting him. Sounds like a lot, but maybe he's just saying it's pretty much all of America that supports me. And he's probably right about that. What should we think about this vote tracker? What should we think about all the early voting statistics we're hearing that tell us Republicans are outperforming 2020? Democrats in this or that county are really doing great. Elections are known to be rigged and known to be fake by the people who run them, the people who vote in them, and the people who run in them. Population statistics, fake. Election results, fake. Polls, fake. But early voting numbers reported by the exact same people, those have to be dead on accurate, because that is real evidence being compiled during this obviously fake process. Perhaps we should spend all our time looking at those numbers and figuring out what might happen so that we are already collectively preparing narratives that allow us to believe the television when it reports to us the things the state wants us to know. Their body count tracker during COVID, that was ridiculous and offensive. But this vote tracker, that's the most important thing we can spend our time watching. It's going to simultaneously create and then soothe our fears in a perpetual cycle, so we may as well just stare at it all the time, at least for the next 2 days. And then maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 30 or 90 after that, as very real votes in this very real election continue to come in. Now, the Des Moines Register polling and this lady Ann Selzer are just legendary. We're told that she's just an excellent pollster in Iowa, but the truth is that she is the narrative setter for primary election narratives. She is a key influencer of public perception whenever we have a presidential primary process. And so no one understands how absurd that is. We are told that she's actually an expert. You can trust her information extra. Just ask Nate Silver. This is from Newsweek yesterday. What shocking new Iowa poll means for Kamala Harris's chances. Just days before the election, a new poll by one of America's most trusted pollsters has Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris leading her Republican rival Donald Trump by 3 points in deep red Iowa. The new poll, conducted by Selzer & Co. for the Des Moines Register and Mediacom, was released on Saturday, prompting polling analyst Nate Silver to write a swift analysis, calling the poll shocking and saying releasing it took guts. Ann Selzer has a long history of bucking the conventional wisdom and being right, Silver wrote on his blog, Silver Bulletin. In a world where most pollsters have a lot of egg on their faces, she has near oracular status. Oh, the Oracle of Iowa, Ann Selzer. Kamala Harris leads 47 to 44, which means 9% of Iowa voters, according to her poll, are either undecided or supporting one of the third-party candidates. Trump, who has always dominated in Iowa, including over establishment Republicans in this year's primary, is somehow losing his dominant edge in Iowa to Kamala for no reason. And we should trust this poll because Ann Selzer really knows her stuff, according to Nate Silver, the guy who told us that polls provide election narratives, and the guy who told us, you know which polls are most trustworthy this election cycle? Outliers. Before Selzer's poll, Silver's model had given Harris a 9% chance of winning Iowa, but afterward, that nearly doubled to 17%. Silver ranks Selzer & Co. as one of the top 2 pollsters in America. 538 ranks Selzer 12th in its list of 282 pollsters for its track record and methodology. Silver called Selzer a maverick for releasing the poll, given that, in his view, many other pollsters are herding together by publishing results that are almost an exact tie. If you had to play the odds, this time Selzer will probably be wrong, Silver wrote, pointing out that other polls still show a Trump lead, including an Iowa poll conducted by Emerson College, also released on Saturday, where Trump leads by 9 points, carrying 54% of the vote to Harris's 45. And now all the pollsters and poll analysts are analyzing these polls, suggesting that one or the other is the one that's actually correct, despite knowing that all of them are only narrative devices. Now, polling legend Ann Selzer went on some sort of podcast with Mark Halperin, who is a left-wing mainstream normie who, for whatever reason, is being resuscitated by people like Tucker Carlson. It is a very strange op. But the two of them had a conversation about Ann Selzer's actual numbers, focused on a post on X, formerly Twitter, by a man named Ryan Gudersky, who is just on CNN constantly now for some reason. But Gudersky writes, read through the Selzer crosstabs and it's just straight crazy. Here's Selzer versus the 2020 exit polls. Now, we are supposed to take exit polls seriously. Those are what the results were. They're not accurate. They're not better than normal polls. They are in no way, quote unquote, scientific. But none of that matters because we are told this is the best information we have on who voted and how. Therefore, we have to use it despite it not being good information at all. Now, we can understand that and ignore it all the time, but it is still used in the mainstream as the definitive story about the demographics and the tendencies of real voters in 2020's fake election. And so I'll quickly go through these numbers. Overall, the 2020 exits, Republicans +8 in Iowa, and Selzer has them up +3, so an 11-point swing. Senior women, D+6 in Iowa in 2020, according to the exit polls. Selzer has them at +35, a 29-point swing. Senior men, Republican +32 in 2020, Republican +2 in Selzer's poll, a 30-point swing. Independents were D+4, now they're D+7, a 3-point swing. Women went from D+3 to D+20, a 23-point swing. Men from R+19 to R+14, 5 points. Rurals down from R+28 to R+20. Suburbs from R+3 to Democrats +23. Kamala Harris is outperforming the Donald Trump exit polls in Iowa, according to Selzer's poll, by 26 points. Kamala Harris, Iowans with no college education went from R+17 to R+12, lost 5 points there, and college educated went from D+7 to D+30, so a 23-point spike among the college educated headed in Kamala Harris's direction. This all in polling legend Ann Selzer's new poll in the Des Moines Register. Here's a bit of the conversation between Halperin and Selzer.
Right. Okay. So Noah, are you able to put up that tweet? Maybe it's up and I can't see it because it's up. It's up. All right. Ann, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you just go through and say what you think about those criticisms?
Well, I'm trying. This is in a format that's a little difficult for me to see. What does this D represent and the R represent?
D. So they're saying that, and again, he says read through the Selzer crosstabs.
Yeah.
So they're saying that they know that this poll shows, and again, it's they say your sample it's more 3% more Democrats than Republican, whereas the electorate last time was 8% more Republican. It says that you have Indies voting Democrat +4, whereas last time they voted for +7, +4. So they're saying if you compare what you have with what happened in 20, according to the exit polls, it's way too big a change across all these groups in a uniform way towards pro-Harris as opposed to Trump.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time I'm seeing this, and so it's sort of against my nature to think I understand everything that this is saying, and I haven't cross-checked these numbers to know how that actually pans out. But I'm going to say that it is clear that senior women are an advantage to Kamala Harris in our poll. Kamala Harris wins by more than 2-1, actually, maybe even more than that among senior women. It's a big, big spread. So I don't know. I mean, the truth of it.
So the pollster can't make sense of her own numbers. And hey, maybe that's just an honest mistake. Maybe she just asked the questions and people answered them. And all she's doing is accurately recording the numbers and reporting them to us. She can't explain this enormous shift to Kamala Harris in Iowa, a dominant Trump state, but it definitely happened. And you can trust this poll because it's an outlier, and Ann Selzer just has one of the best reputations anywhere. You see, you have to rely on her credentials. She's an expert. And why is she an expert? Because she just always nails it on the Iowa primaries. And in fact, that's one of the biggest drivers of public sentiment in the country, which is a big responsibility. So thank goodness she is such an expert. Of course, there's no explanation for how something like this could have happened in reality, but there doesn't have to be because she's doing science with numbers. Those are the same as data. And so you don't even have to trust Ann Selzer. You just trust the data and trust the science. But you can trust Ann Selzer because she's an expert and you're supposed to trust the experts. Now, there's no way to substantiate any of this, but you don't have to because you trust the data, you trust the science, you trust the experts. And while normally some totally unexplained outlier would be discarded, in this case, you trust the outlier because outliers mean the numbers are real this time. Nate Silver just told us that. It's a perfect communist system. Each part supports all the other parts. None of them make sense individually. None of them work at all. And absolutely none of it maps onto any discernible reality. But because it's imaginary, each one of its parts is imbued with the ability to seem plausible and fit in perfectly with the rest of the imaginary parts. And at that point, it's just marketing. Do you want this reality prime, or do you want this wonderful imaginary world that we're creating around you? You choose whether or not to believe it and to participate in it, and thereby help to construct that false reality within reality prime. And that decision is often made on nothing more than whether or not you are willing to accept the incentive and punishment structure of that false reality, because it's going to be a whole lot more tempting. Anything you can imagine can and will be yours. Just step right up and enter the false reality. If every part of a system is imaginary, the system itself doesn't become real just because it all fits together. And it doesn't become real just because with a number of assumptions, it can be rationalized in some way to map onto some discernible reality. So long as you're not really paying attention, and so long as you don't care too much that every part of the system is corrupted and broken and manipulated and exploitative and ultimately evil. So you have the data, you have the science, you have the experts, and all of it fits together. It's internally consistent, and therefore it must be true. Except that's not what makes it true. It's not our best explanation for what's actually happening. And even if it was, it wouldn't matter because it's not true. It's not the best we've got, and that should be honest because it's not true. The regime even tells us they know it's not true. They're just giving us their best guess, but we have to trust them because they are the authoritative source. And eventually you realize that your entire world is like that. There's nothing that is tethered to reality prime whatsoever. It's just all these things we trust from authority. We believe the world is how it is because the regime tells us the world is how it is, and it all fits together, so it must be true, or at least true enough. And so because it's the best we've got, that's what we have to go with, and in going with that, we will enact it in life, changing reality prime. The fact that there is a false system that all of us can understand, not only in its structure, but in the falsity of its elements, thus understanding the whole system is false and can be seen as a wholly false system. If that exists, then there must also be something real underneath that system upon which that layer was built. And at that point, it really is only marketing. Choose one or choose the other. And you don't choose by pressing buttons on an iPad attached to a black box down at your local elementary school cafeteria. You choose which reality you want to live in, and you live in accordance with that reality. Do you choose reality prime? Do you choose the false reality? Donald Trump responded to the Des Moines Register poll yesterday on Truth Social. No president has done more for farmers and the great state of Iowa than Donald J. Trump. In fact, it's not even close. All polls, except for one heavily skewed toward the Democrats by a Trump hater who called it totally wrong the last time, have me up by a lot. All caps now. I love the farmers and they love me. The just out Emerson poll has me up 10 points in Iowa. Thank you. So the Selzer poll pushes the idea that Kamala might see some late wave in her favor. It's not about the possibility of her winning a state by 3 points. It's the possibility of her winning a dominant Trump state by 3 points in a totally unexplainable last-minute turn of events. That kind of shift in voter sentiment is something we've never seen before. We don't know how to explain it. All the political science we've ever learned can't explain it. And just one brave pollster in Iowa was able to predict it. But the voters must have known something we didn't. Somehow all the polls missed it, but across the country there was this anti-Trump sentiment. Maybe it was the Hitler thing, maybe it was the Jeffrey Epstein thing, maybe it was the thing about a firing squad for Liz Cheney, maybe it was about assassins shooting through supporters. Maybe we just called him a rapist and a racist enough times. Maybe it's impossible to explain. But one thing we know for sure is that the election system is still dependable because Ann Selzer, in her outlier poll, was able to predict something like this might be somehow possible. No one could have seen this coming, but she did. And of course she did. She's a legend. Trust the expert, trust the data, trust the science. Naturally, CNN got their A-team together to analyze this new polling that could indicate a shift in absolutely everything we've ever known. Let's see how they did. And thank goodness for CNN, the most trusted name in news. Their people bring their own data.
What do you see? So I've also, in my own data, seen senior women trending a little more Democratic. I don't think it is to the extent that was found in the Selzer poll, but she's a great pollster. Even good pollsters sometimes have outliers, and that is why I think what David Axelrod said was so important about uncertainty. This election could be a reboot. That's sort of what the New York Times Siena polls are showing, that Harris has rebooted the Obama coalition. She's getting younger voters. She's getting voters of color to turn out for her in big numbers. But this also could be a realignment, and that's what the Trump team is hoping for, that they're actually doing better with younger voters, better with voters of color than expected. And so even if they're losing seniors by a little bit, especially senior women, they're making up that ground in other places. We don't yet know if this is a reboot or a realignment. And just because the polls are generally showing this race close, I want to be clear, the uncertainty is not just we don't know who's going to win. It's also possible that one of these candidates could run away with this. The uncertainty is not just, well, we're sure it'll be close. We aren't sure of anything right now. And I know that's an unsatisfying thing to hear before the election.
It's so important. It is so important to underscore that, that it is so tight that really anything could happen. And we need to say that what we know is that we don't know much.
So it could be a reboot or a realignment. Older women are shifting toward Harris, but maybe not to the extent shown in that Iowa poll. We've been telling you for months that it will be a close race, but now it's also possible that it'll be so close it actually ends in a blowout. It's so close that it won't be close at all. It could be a tiny Kamala win or a tiny Trump win, but also it could be an enormous Kamala win or an enormous Trump win. It's hard to say, so we're going to provide narrative seeding to support the system no matter what results end up being reported. They had a 5-person panel on a Sunday to just spitball ideas about what might explain these new possibilities that they had never thought of before. We never even considered that there might be an enormous shift in voter sentiment, totally unexplained and unexplainable, just right before the election. Well, we'd better figure out a way to make that outcome make sense. But of course they can't do it, because they have to imagine things that will fit in with all of their other imagined elements in this ridiculous system they've created for themselves, the one that we are watching collapse day by day. I don't have any problem explaining the Ann Selzer poll. It's a fake poll in a fake election. It is a narrative seeding device. If that's a crazy conspiracy theory, then why were mainstream outlets just supporting Nate Silver saying all the same things last week, providing us a plausible rationalization for why the extraordinarily unlikely might just happen without anyone understanding why? Over the weekend, we had Kamala Harris's performance on Saturday Night Live and the controversy to follow. The performance was cringe-inducing, but it was also just the rehashing of a sketch they've used before. By all means, go ahead and watch it. I wouldn't recommend it, but everyone makes their own choices. This is the Hollywood Reporter. Yesterday, FCC Commissioner claims Kamala Harris's SNL appearance violated equal time rule. Wow, the equal time rule. How about that? I did an episode discussing this back in June prior to the Trump-Biden debate called Equal Time, suggesting that there was more control than what it seems over the media operations, and that we will see some enforcement of the old ways of going about things. A Federal Communications Commission commissioner claimed incorrectly on Saturday that Kamala Harris's appearance on Saturday Night Live violated the equal time rule. This is a clear and blatant effort to evade the FCC's equal time rule, Commissioner Brendan Carr wrote on X, formerly Twitter, in response to news of Harris's planned performance. The FCC's equal time rule requires American radio and television stations to offer equal time to rival political candidates. However, the burden falls on the candidates to request those equal opportunities, and the agency's policy on the rule states, equal opportunities generally means providing comparable time and placement to opposing candidates. It does not require a station to provide opposing candidates with programs identical to the initiating candidate. In his statement on social media, which an FCC representative noted did not represent the agency's official views, Carr wrote, "The purpose of the rule is to avoid exactly this type of biased and partisan conduct, a licensed broadcaster using the public airwaves to exert its influence for one candidate on the eve of an election," adding, "unless the broadcaster offered equal time to other qualifying candidates." Now, it's an interesting issue. Was there some sleight of hand on the part of NBC or Saturday Night Live and producer Lauren Michaels to put Kamala Harris on during the show to give her that platform with that audience to make her look attractive in certain ways? I mean, that's their big Saturday night show. What could be comparable to that? They're doing it just days before the election. How are they going to provide Donald Trump equal time and be able to avoid this controversy? Well, the complaints were registered yesterday. It became a big issue. And then NBC gave Donald Trump a minute during NASCAR and a minute during Sunday Night Football to air this.
Hello to our great sports fans, and I hope you're having a fantastic time. We're 2 days away from the most important election in the history of our country. We've got to save our country, and it needs saving. It's in very bad shape. The worst economic numbers in generations were just announced 2 days ago. We're losing jobs. We're losing everything, including viability. We're going to end up in a depression based on what's been happening. We've never seen anything like it, at least for the last 40 years. We have to straighten out our country. We have to close our borders. We have to lower our taxes. We have to get rid of inflation, and we're going to do it. Just remember, Kamala and her friends broke it. I'll fix it. Most important election in the history of our country. Go and vote.
Now, what is more valuable? Airtime during NASCAR and the NFL to deliver that message, or the same amount of airtime for a Saturday Night Live sketch about Kamala cackling and having a funny name? Ha ha ha. The media is pushing a backlash against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for mentioning vaccines and fluoride. These topics are just off limits. CNN's article from yesterday, Trump says RFK Jr.'s proposal to remove fluoride from public water sounds okay to me. Oh, how dare he? Former President Donald Trump on Sunday expressed tentative support for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s plan to order the removal of fluoride from water supplies during a potential second Trump term, saying that it sounds okay to me. Well, I haven't talked to him about it yet, but it sounds okay to me. Trump told NBC News, it's possible. Trump has said Kennedy would have a big role in healthcare if the former president wins re-election, and that Kennedy wants to address vaccines specifically. Kennedy has been a leading promoter of debunked conspiracy theories about vaccines. Oh, yes, extremely debunked. Everything has been debunked. I got to say, there are still people on our side of things who say that's been debunked. Remove that phrase and that thought from your thinking. That's been debunked is an appeal to authority, the authority of whoever did the debunking. Now, you might be right that something's not true, but saying that's been debunked is not a good strategy because you're relying on the authority of some person or outlet who claims to have positively refuted whatever claim is being made. And that's not something they're generally able to do. It's better to just respond, hey, that's not true, and then force the person to prove their side of the case, at least through a rational argument that makes clear they're understanding the issue and using sound logic, rather than providing them an alternate case or an appeal to authority that won't ultimately be convincing to anyone. Now, I'm no hater of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In fact, I think I was the first person out there suggesting the possibility that RFK Jr. might end up being vice president. I've talked for a long time about him having potentially roles to go after the deep state, maybe attorney general. Who knows what that'll look like. But Donald Trump doesn't need RFK Jr. to handle the vaccine thing for him. Trump has already said that he would remove federal funding from any schools or universities that put vaccine or mask mandates in place. The school vaccine mandates are what keeps the vaccine regime going. Parents are forced to have their children injected so that their children can attend school. If that forcing function is removed, the system as it exists now simply collapses. That's ultimately the only thing that's holding it up. Aside from the flu shot nonsense, I guess they've got veterinarians, but not much beyond that. NBC News asked Trump whether banning certain vaccines would be an option. Well, I'm going to talk to Kennedy and talk to other people, and I'll make a decision, but he's a very talented guy and has strong views, Trump said. Kennedy, who Trump suggested would oversee a health portfolio in a potential future administration, wrote in a social media post Saturday that Trump's administration would advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water, which he claimed was tied to numerous medical conditions. The former independent presidential candidate called the element an industrial waste. And while fluoride can be a byproduct of some industries, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it is also found naturally in the environment in water and rocks. In his post, Kennedy wrote on January 20th, the Trump White House will advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water. Fluoride is an industrial waste associated with arthritis, bone fractures, bone cancer, IQ loss, neurodevelopmental disorders, and thyroid disease. The article goes on to say state and local governments control most of the water supplies in municipalities across the country. The CDC recommends community water fluoridation as a cost-effective way to improve residents' oral health. Exposure to fluoride above the public health recommended over many years can result in skeletal fluorosis, a condition that causes weaker bones and joint pain. A federal review published in August by the National Institutes of Health's toxicology program concluded that higher levels of fluoride are linked to lowered IQ in children. The program based its conclusion on studies involving fluoride levels at about twice the recommended limit for drinking water. Now, that's kind of surprising because I was always told that was a conspiracy theory. Let's go on. Kennedy has a long history of sharing baseless conspiracy theories about the impacts of man-made chemicals in the environment. The article also mentions that Alex Jones said chemicals in the water were turning the friggin' frogs gay. This Trump freakout narrative did very little over the weekend because it turns out there aren't that many people who are pro-vaccine the way they once were. And for all those people who've lost trust in vaccines and in the science and in the medical system, are they going to freak out over these comments and run back to Kamala Harris and Big Pharma? No, they're not. So the unexplainable shift in public sentiment indicated by the Selzer poll can't be explained here either. That didn't stop Van Jones from trying to sell it.
I know Bobby. Bobby he actually wrote the foreword for my first book. I love Bobby. He should be nowhere near America's government. Mm-hmm. He should be nowhere near America's government. And even to have someone like him in the room muddying the waters, somebody who has an agenda, to your point, has already come to a conclusion, is very, very dangerous. If you are a mom or you are a dad tonight and you're trying to figure out who should I vote for, do not vote for somebody who's even pretending he's going to put this person in charge of everybody's health care. It would be incredibly reckless even have him in the room.
Now, I'm just going to take a wild guess and suggest that Van Jones hasn't put nearly the time Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has into understanding Big Pharma and the healthcare industry and vaccines and environmental chemical pollution. So perhaps it's Van Jones, the guy on the propaganda network that's funded by Big Pharma, who has an agenda and has already reached a conclusion. Let's also notice how much work the framing of this guy shouldn't be anywhere near government is actually doing here to make Van Jones's case. It's very important to keep Robert F. Kennedy Jr. away from government. His ideas are not just wrong, they are so wrong that they become dangerous. Van Jones, on the other hand, trusts the experts. He trusts the data. He trusts the science. He knows the official story about fluoride and environmental toxins and vaccines. He's on the news, therefore he speaks on behalf of the authoritative source. He delivers the authoritative source's messaging to the public. His only agenda is truth, derived from the authoritative source. Bobby Kennedy is evil, and he's around Trump, which makes Trump extra evil. And maybe that will explain the enormous shift in public sentiment. It was a close race the whole time, but now it's such a close race that it might be a blowout, all due to a last-minute shift of absolutely dramatic and extraordinary proportions. Older women realized that they liked Kamala Harris and not Donald Trump, just right there at the end. In fact, that's what women realized in general. Oh, and independence. What explains all this? Well, men didn't show up to vote. Christians didn't show up to vote. Election deniers? Well, they didn't show up to vote. That's why Donald Trump lost this very real election, due to this extraordinary and unexplainable shift at the end, and the fact that all of the most committed people in his base absolutely abandoned him. It's got nothing to do with the fact that our elections are manipulated and rigged in nearly uncountable ways, and that even if they were legitimate, they still would not be how leaders of nations are determined. It's not just that they're rigged and manipulated, it's that they're fake, and we need to stop deceiving ourselves. If you think that's too much, okay, let's talk next week. But let's say you're right, and all that matters is the rigging and the manipulation. The level of rigging and manipulation means that the elections are incapable of conveying the public's will and consent to govern. They are not capable of producing legitimate representatives. It therefore does not matter what results are reported by the television. That is just going to be another part of the story that people will then react to. So how will people react? Will they react in the understanding that our elections are rigged, they are manipulated, they are fake, they are wholly incapable of creating legitimacy? Or will they resort to their conditioning, understanding that the state is their master, and if the state says it's this way, there's absolutely nothing they can do about it, so they better just get in line and obey again? The regime will provide every opportunity to bring people back into the fold and put them back under their umbrella, bring people back into the regime's warm and loving embrace. And we will be treated to a nonstop onslaught of psychological operations meant to drive us insane, pit us against our family members, encourage each one of us to believe that our neighbor is our enemy. And our neighbors may still be brainwashed, they might be standard issue villagers, and they might be Trump deranged, but the enemy is still the regime. The enemy is still the regime system. And people have continued to support the regime system, encouraging full participation by everyone in that system, certain that if enough of us participated in the system as hard as we possibly could, the system would allow us to conquer it by its own rules and under its own control. Now, maybe that'll happen in some way that I just cannot see out there. And if it does, wonderful. No matter what conclusion we reach, the cards we were dealt will be the ones we have to play. The point is to be prepared for it in a way that our enemy is not prepared for it. The way to do that is by putting our emotions aside. The way to put our emotions aside is to understand that no matter what happens tomorrow, we still keep going. We still have to live our lives in the right way. We have to be hopeful about our future, not only for ourselves, but for the people around us. We have to work hard and be honest and just keep going. No matter how much the system fights back, no matter how much suffering it intends to cause, no matter how many incentives it offers us to give up, no matter what happens in the fake election tomorrow, the system is incapable of producing legitimacy, and legitimacy therefore cannot be derived from that system in the first place. The legitimacy only comes through the public mandate, as Donald Trump describes. It only comes through the will and consent of the people to be governed. No matter what we are told the results are, the results of the so-called election tomorrow are unacceptable until they can be verified transparently by everyone with certainty. Otherwise, there cannot be and should not be any consent conveyed to this government whatsoever. Our elected representatives in state governments and local governments will not be any more legitimate than whatever the television says about the presidential election. Therefore, we cannot look to them for solutions. All of them should be challenged everywhere. If they cannot prove their legitimacy in office, then it should be assumed that they have none. None of this should ever be about violence. We have a vast, vast majority, and that vast, vast majority has the vast, vast majority of weapons. There are going to be people out there suggesting civil war is our best bet based on what the television says, But those people, after 4 years, haven't figured out that our elections aren't real. Does that seem like those are real sovereign citizens or real American patriots willing to stand up for their nation and for their fellow Americans? No, that sounds like an op. Why would people who are statist enough to believe that our solution comes through winning a fake election be the first ones calling for civil war upon hearing once again that the elections are fake? That's an op. It's meant to exploit the emotion that will be caused by the television. This isn't about blackpilling or being pessimistic about a result. We are going to win in a real way, and we are on the verge of an American renaissance. I'm as optimistic as can be. I'm just not going to pretend that the solution is going to come tomorrow in the form of people pressing buttons on an iPad attached to a black box down at the Sportsman's Lodge. So it has to be something else. What it is your choice. Are you going to give your consent willingly to the system again, or will you withhold that consent? Because if you withhold your consent, the system has to change. It's not about knowing what comes next. You can't know what comes next, but you can reject something evil. An election result that's in question should be rejected by everyone. And no one should empower the government that produced that result to be the entity that checks the result. If a claim about election fraud goes to court and the court throws it out for standing or mootness without looking at the evidence, or even if the court does look at the evidence and simply sides with the people who steal elections, as happened in 2022 in Arizona with Kerry Lake's signature matching lawsuit, does that mean that your will and consent to be governed have been conveyed to the government? No, it doesn't mean that. The regime putting their court on the case, no matter what that court decides, is not something that necessitates the conveyance of your will and consent, and it's not an acceptable proxy. Whatever results were given have to be challenged, and it has to be proven that real lawful American votes were given and received and properly recorded and properly reported. The whole process transparent and verifiable. Otherwise, no one should consent. There are scenarios that Trump could be reported as the winner, but that just provides a different narrative backdrop for where we go as we move forward. Trump's legitimacy will not be derived from the election. It will be derived from the public mandate because it is narratively too big to rig. He already has that. It's already been this way for a very long time. And if 2020 hadn't been so totally jarring, from the very deadly pandemic to the summer of love to the stolen election, we may already be there. But it's different this time around. This time around, if Trump is reported as the winner, all those people who told us for the last 4 years that elections cannot be rigged and stolen will tell us once again, as they did in 2016, that the election was rigged and stolen. Will they ask for full reviews and audits of the elections? If they do, we should say, yes, by all means, let's do that. But they won't do that because they know we'd take them up on it. And they know that they wouldn't win, which means they understand they don't have the public mandate. Perhaps all of this should be an indication that they intend to report that Trump has won, because then they can fight to disqualify Trump and replace him with J.D. Vance, if nothing else. They're talking a lot about a contingent election, and we expect that could be good for Trump, assuming everything else remains the same. But what if electors or what if states choose someone other than Trump and say, hey, how's this for you? You guys going to accept J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley? Will you accept some compromise candidate, some bipartisan agreement on who can be president next? You know, to avoid civil war. And what if you don't accept and they just go with it anyway? Will we all be glad we supported the regime's system of choosing our rulers again and their ability to review it and determine the outcomes? All of it well beyond the bounds of any consent that the people could possibly convey. You might remember this guy from 2020 in Georgia. This is Gabriel Sterling, the chief operating officer for the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. This is from CBS's 60 Minutes last night.
Sterling hoped his message would get through to everyone, but it hasn't.
And there's some you're never going to convince. And you just have to accept that you're never going to convince them. But for the vast majority of Americans who have questions, basically well, there's this much smoke, there must be something. Nobody would lie this much about it. So I think there's savable souls there who basically, they want to understand. We have to tell them over and over again. Voter suppression's fake. Voter fraud is fake. It's used to raise money and get you angry.
How about that for unipartisan compromise? The Democrats are wrong. There actually is not voter suppression, not in the way they say. That's not what voter IDs are used for. And he's right about that because, of course, they can't actually prove any voter suppression because of voter IDs. It's all theoretical. But he also says that voter fraud is fake. Now, a more supportable claim would be that election fraud is fake because they even admit that voter fraud is fake. Voters cast fraudulent votes. That's all that's required. But the election fraud, the system designed to rig and manipulate elections, or more accurately, to substantiate the totally made up results of elections, that's very real, which is why they don't let you check. It's why they create imaginary processes that suggest the election system worked as designed. That's what the audits they run actually do. The systems tests, the logic and accuracy tests, the risk limiting audits. It just suggests that in that instance, with that machine, the system is working as intended. It doesn't suggest that there was not widespread, rampant election fraud and manipulation determining the outcomes of elections. He's just supporting the system because people need to trust the system the same way they trust the experts and the data and the science. Everything derived from the authoritative source must be trusted at all times, and they are prepared to enforce it. It's a matter of whether or not the people are prepared to resist. Because if the people aren't resisting, even though the regime gives them fake news and fake elections, then from the regime's perspective, that is the people's will and consent. People would rather lose the country than lose their reputation among their peers or their coworkers or within their family. People who talk about how evil the system is are still afraid to leave it because they're afraid of what might replace it. But the replacement is already here. It's already within us. It's the choice to go in the other direction and to do it whether or not the people around you agree. Your decisions are sovereign. They are yours and yours alone. You don't make them by committee. It's just a matter of what you believe and how that motivates your actions, because that dictates the world you will create around yourself. And maybe it would be easier if we all believed the same thing, but that's not how it is. And rather than avoiding these disagreements, we have to embrace them. If you're the person who sees the path ahead, then you have to walk it and allow other people to catch up. Encourage them to do so. But don't stay back there forever. Because if we all do that, then no one goes anywhere. They're not just going to admit that their system is designed to exploit us. And by the same token, they're not going to allow their system to be used to prove that to the people. So something else has to do it. We know what's coming if Trump is announced the winner. Here's Friar Cuck Jamie Raskin.
When I say we will support a free and fair election, no, we're not going to allow them to steal it in the states or steal it at the Department of Justice or steal it with any other election official in the country. If it's a free and fair election, we will do what we've always done. We will honor it.
So finally, and that is the Democrats' history. They honor it. That is the big difference between the parties. One of the big. Okay, so.
And on that point, I'll tell you, the political scientists have told us the hallmark characteristics of a fascist political party. Number one, they don't accept the outcome of democratic elections that don't go their way.
Yeah.
Right? Number two, they embrace political violence as an instrument for obtaining power. And three, they're not organized democratically. They're organized top down as a cult of a personality around a charismatic or allegedly charismatic figure, right?
So how about that? Jamie Raskin will only accept the results of the election if he deems the election to be free and fair. and he has objected in the past. Regardless, that's exactly what Donald Trump says. He says, I'll accept the results of the election if it's free and fair. Why is it so much different when Jamie Raskin says it? He and Bill Maher then pretend that Democrats will challenge the results, but they always eventually give up on their challenges. And that's what makes them good. Trump, on the other hand, challenged the election results and didn't give up on that challenge. And that makes him bad. It's only good to challenge election results if you don't really mean it, I guess. And of course, that is actually what they mean. That is their strategy. That is how they delegitimize someone going into office when they can't prevent that person from going into office. So it's not actually ever that they're really objecting to a stolen election. They're only trying to delegitimize winners when things don't go their way, which is exactly what they're accusing Trump and his supporters of. And then he just goes and describes Trump's behavior as what political scientists say are the characteristics of fascism. I know that people want it to be over. They want things to be resolved tomorrow. They want the TV to tell them we had a good outcome. Everyone came out, voted as hard as possible, and we've had a giant and magnificent red wave. And I would love that too. It's a lovely fantasy, but it doesn't get the job done. Even in that scenario, the work has to be done taking apart the illegitimate foreign occupying government and the administrative state built up around that and replacing it. There's more work to be done. And Donald Trump and his supporters, the America First movement, are going to be opposed in every way imaginable by the same powerful forces that have been acting against us the entire time. And to handle that well, we are going to need to be calm and prepared in the face of an onslaught of high-grade psychological operations meant to drive us apart and break our spirits so that we will beg for the safety and comfort of the regime's warm embrace once again. This is not something we need to fear. This is just something we need to understand so we can ride it out and provide a source of stability for the people around us who are freaking out. Apart from anything that happens with the election, there are still innumerable trump cards that have not been played. Maybe tomorrow, instead of seeing 2024 fake election results, we can see the results of the 2020 election. Maybe the TV will report those for us. Elon Musk hinted that all the information would be coming out if Donald Trump were to win. I can't imagine there's much stopping that from happening. You got to understand, we're not even on offense yet. Trump has just been navigating the system to this point, to bring us to this point and win that public mandate so that he is empowered and enabled to do the things that must be done next. This isn't just about tomorrow and whatever the early vote was, whatever the mail-in vote was. This is about the days and the weeks and the months to come, where all the learning and all the work and all the understanding that have been built up over these past 4 years will be put to use in explaining the system and its manipulations, in explaining psyops and false flags, and the ability of the regime to fake the events of wars and to cause widespread panic about existential crises like pandemics and cyber pandemics and nuclear wars and natural disasters exacerbated by climate change. We know all the techniques, and they won't work if people don't believe them. All you have to understand is that elections are exactly the same way. You don't owe anyone your faith in these elections. You don't owe it to your country. In fact, you owe your country the opposite. No faith in these elections. Demand a system that can produce legitimacy. We are Americans. We do not just submit. And for the record, a civil war would be submission. That would be a failure. There is nothing the regime wants more than a civil war, because then they are justified in doing whatever they want to do. They've already been broadcasting to the world that Trump is corrupt, that Trump is racist, that Trump is an abuser. He's a misogynist. He's a liar. He's an egomaniac. He's a narcissist. He is literally Hitler. He is literally Hitler. He is literally Hitler. That's what we've been told for 9 straight years. What do you imagine they intend to do with that? You think that the people who declare themselves the winners of fake elections do the Hitler thing in order to win a real election? They know what they intend to do next, no matter what outcome presents itself tomorrow. And to accomplish their goals, they will need people to believe their version of events, their story, all the imaginary elements that produce the consistency within their system that drives the belief that the system must be the real thing and not some dark shadow, not some distorted reflection, but it is. And to defeat that system, you just need to withhold belief. That is your choice to make. Donald Trump did 3 rallies yesterday on 11/3. He's doing 4 today on 11/4. At one of those rallies yesterday, Donald Trump had a problem with the teleprompter and basically spoke off the cuff for about 15 or 20 minutes, and he talked at great length about our elections. He said he was happy that the teleprompters had gone off because when he's speaking off the cuff, ignoring the teleprompters, that's when all the truth comes out. And so I will let Donald Trump close out the show today, and I will leave you with this. No matter what the TV says tomorrow, we will continue forward, defeating these communists and their psychological operations at every turn, simply by refusing to adopt the beliefs that cause us to act in a way that builds society in their image. That is well within our power. It is well within our grasp. It just requires us to make a choice. Here is Donald Trump off teleprompter on November 3rd in Pennsylvania.
The election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence and failure, which is what we have right now, or whether we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. And I'm asking you to be excited about the future of our country again. I'm asking you to dream big again. This will be America's new golden age. This is going to be a golden age, and it's hard to believe, isn't it, huh? We're talking about a golden age, but that's hard to believe because we have been so low. We've never been this low. The image of our country is terrible. It's terrible. It's a failed country. That's what it is. They view us as a nation in decline, but even worse, they view us as a failed country. We're going to turn it around. The image is so bad. What they've done to our country, this incompetent group of fools, what they've done to our country is so damn bad. And the media is so damn bad. It's unbelievable. Every inch of it. Every problem facing us can be solved, but the fate of our nation is in your hands. On Tuesday, you have to stand up and you have to go. You got to just go out and you got to stand up. We've done this for so long. This is 9 years. We have to get out. But you have to tell that horrible, terrible, the worst ever vice president. Nobody knows where the other guy is. Where the hell is he? Where the hell did he go, David? Where is he? Nobody knows where the hell. Where is Biden? Remember? We used to go, where's Hunter? We used to go, where's Hunter? Now we go, where the hell is Biden? Where's Joe? You know, when you think they stole the election. It was just, they walked in, they said, you're out. Right? That's a threat to democracy. They call me threat to democracy. They stole the election from this guy, whether you like him or not. They stole the election. They walked in. They said, get out of here, Joe. You're out. You're dead. You're out, Joe. And man, oh, man, he likes me better than he likes her. I really believe. And you have to tell Kamala that you've had enough, Kamala. You've had enough. You're the worst ever. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. Get out of here. You know, it's amazing. I watched her yesterday, and she's saying all these things she's going to do when she gets to office. First of all, she's got 3 more months. But more importantly, why the hell didn't she do this stuff before? First of all, none of it did she believe in. None of it. She's changed 15 different policies. She's a radical left Marxist. And if she ever heads this country is finished. And I say it loud and clear. everything we've been fighting for so hard to achieve for the past 9 years all comes down to the next 2 days. Think of it. We've worked in this for 9 years, and we got a phony press. We got a lot of crooked people out there. We're fighting like a son of a gun. We're fighting. They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing. Look at what's going on. Look at what's going on in your state. Every day, they're talking about extending hours and stuff. Who ever heard of this stuff? We should have one-day voting and paper ballots. Then I just heard that a couple of states may go an extra 12 days. How the hell do you have an election? You know, they spend all of this money on these damn machines, and paper ballots, you'd have the answer by 9 o'clock tonight. It's a damn shame, and I'm the only one that talks about it because everyone's afraid to damn talk about it. And then they accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist. These are conspiracy, and they want to lock you up. They want to put you in jail. The ones that should be locked up are the ones that cheat on these horrible elections that we go through in our country. And I don't know what's going to happen, but for future elections, I won't be even a part of it. But you ought to damn well go to paper ballots. You ought to go to voter ID. And you ought to have the election over by 9 o'clock. I'm hearing now they're going to take weeks. Can you imagine? They spend all this money on machines, and they're going to say, we may take an extra 12 days to determine. And what do you think happens during that 12 days? What do you think happens? These elections have to be decided by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on Tuesday night. Bunch of crooked people. These are crooked people. You know, in California, they just signed a bill that if you're an official or anybody, you're not even allowed to ask anybody for their voter ID. And if you do, you've created a criminal act or something. I mean, they only do that because they want to cheat. What the hell are they doing? The whole world is laughing at us. They're laughing at us. You know what? And if nothing comes out of this whole thing, it's going to teach you, you damn well better get a different system. And these bloodsuckers up there, they do nothing about it. What a shame. What a shame. That's why the world laughs at us. They all have elections. You know, France had crooked elections because they had paper ballots years ago, and they switched. And now they have paper ballots. And at 9 o'clock in the evening, they called the winner, they called the loser, everyone home, everybody was fine. They had voter ID, they had paper ballots, they had one-day election. At 9 o'clock, it was over. They called the winner, they called the loser, everyone went home. Now they say, well, wait till the next time. We got to get smart as a country. This is just one thing. It's all corrupt. She's corrupt. She's a corrupt person. I'm running against a totally corrupt person. And I'm really not running against her. I'm running against a corrupt machine called the Democrat Party. It's totally a corrupt party. Guys like Adam Shifty Schiff, these are corrupt people. And to think he'll probably be a senator, can you believe it? Watermelon head. No, he's a watermelon head. He's got the smallest neck I've ever seen. I don't know how the hell he can hold up that enlarged watermelon head. What an ugly guy, both inside and out. But it's now or never. This is it. This is the moment. We've been waiting 9 years for this, and we got 2 days, and we got all this crap going on with the press and with the fake stuff and fake polls. And by the way, the polls are just as corrupt as some of the writers back there. They can make those polls sing. They can make them sing. They brag about it. I got a poll. I'm 10 points up in Iowa. One of my enemies just puts out a poll. I'm 3 down. Joni Ernst called me. Everyone's called me. They said, you're killing in Iowa. The farmers love me and I love them. But they came up. They just announced a fake poll. Hey, think of it. Right before the election, that I'm 3 points down. I'm not down in Iowa. I got $28 billion for the farmers. $28 billion. Nobody else would have gotten 10 cents. Joe would sleep. Do you think he thinks about the farmers? And you know who gave me the $28 billion for the farmers? China, because China screwed our farmers. And then they tell me I'm down in Iowa. I don't think so. And you know what? A good poll, Emerson, no friend of mine, they said that poll is wrong. Everybody said, why do they announce a poll that's highly skewed toward Democrats and liberals? Why do they do that? When you read it, they interviewed far more Democrats than they did Republicans. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? And I guess there's a law that they have to say that because they would have preferred not having to say that. Our country is a crooked country, okay? It's a crooked country, and we're going to make it straight. We're going to make it straight, and it's not an easy thing to do. They'll want to put you in jail because you want to make it straight. Think of it. Think of it. They cheat on elections, and you call them on it, and they want to put you in jail. Think about it. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, but I love it. You know why? Because we've proven something, we've shown something, and we're going to get it fixed, and we got to win this election. It's all up to now. I mean, we got 2 days. We've been working for 9 years. We did a great job. We had the best economy ever. We had the wall. We had everything. I built over 500 miles of wall. They don't even talk about the wall. But we had the best border, the safest border. I won't pull down my world's favorite chart because I don't want to waste a lot of your time. But my world's favorite chart, done by the Border Patrol, it said we had the safest border in the history of our country the day that I left. I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well. We had such a great. So now, I mean, every polling booth has hundreds of lawyers standing there. It's all about the lawyers. Everybody's standing at lawyers. Nobody should have that. You should have a damn ballot and you hand it in. Do you know that in Arizona, where I'm winning by a lot, but it takes 4 hours to fill out the ballot. They've got page after page, and people are complaining they don't have time. It takes 4 hours to fill it out. Why is that? Why is that? I can tell you why. But so many places. Pennsylvania, I love Pennsylvania. I went to school here. I think the people are incredible. But they found, as I understand it, I mean, I don't know what's happened in the last day or so, but in Lancaster, they found 2,600 ballots, all done by the same hand. In other words, the same exact penmanship, the same hand, the same everything. It was all done by the same pen, the exact same pen. And then they go and they say, well, this is a conspiracy theorist. It's a terrible thing that's happened to our country. And the whole world watches it, even third world countries. I was telling a friend came in last night. He comes from a country, he works there a lot, and knows it. And it's not a great country, to be honest with you. And he said, but when we vote, they take our fingerprints and they check our fingerprints. We can't get away with anything. This is a third world country. In our country, think of it. You are not allowed to even ask for somebody's voter ID. And if you do ask, I think they have the right to put you in jail. Not the one that's cheating, the one that's asking, I want honesty. Oh, let's go to jail. It's a terrible thing. And I tell you what, I love being off these stupid teleprompters because the truth comes out. The truth comes out. And at least you find out that it's nice to have a president that doesn't have to use teleprompters. You ever see her? And I'm being nasty to her because you know what? She's really bad. She shouldn't have been chosen. She got no votes. This is supposed to be a democracy. You could call it a republic. People say, oh, it's a republic. Okay, whatever you want to call it. It's supposed to be fair. And they ripped the election away from this poor, stupid guy. They ripped it away. Like candy from a baby. It's the way you do. You ever take candy from a baby? Hello, darling, give me some of that candy. Just give it to me. You rip it right out of the baby's hand. That's what happened here. It's a corrupt deal, and I think at some point it's got to be changed. Got to be changed. Do you know that paper ballots, and by the way, now the machines are going to really hit me hard because, you know, they never heard anybody hit them like this, but do you know that paper ballots, paper is very sophisticated. It's called watermark. It's watermarked, highly sophisticated. It's more sophisticated than the machines they use, which can be hacked and things can happen. You know, a great gentleman is Elon Musk. Right? And I said to Elon, I assume you're very good with computers, right? They said, well, I think I'm one of the best. He said, it wasn't the engines that landed that rocket the other day. It was the computers telling the engines what to do. I think I'm good. Yeah, I think I'm really good. Well, he looked at the machines, just looked at them. And he doesn't have to look like normal people. Normal people have to rip them apart and figure out what's going on. That's normal experts. He goes like this. The machines are, oh. He looked, oh. Meaning he knew the machine immediately. You know, he does this stuff for a living. So he looks, and he actually made the statement. He said, look, computers are great for sending rockets up and everything else, but there should never be machines used in voting. Everything should be paper ballots put in boxes, voter ID, also identification for the country. In other words, little questions like, now, are you a citizen of the United States? These are little questions. These aren't big questions. Excuse me, ma'am, are you a citizen of the United States? No, I'm not. You're not allowed to ask. Oh, what city do you live in? It's none of your business. I'm voting. Do you understand? Now, if you show up in a suit and tie, they say, we don't want this guy voting. You got to see what they do. I mean, what they do is so sad. But Elon is a total pro. And I saw his mother, the most elegant woman. I said, Elon, she produced you. Well, she produced one hell of a smart guy. But did you see his mother with a beautiful white hair? She looked like total royalty. And she said she went, I think, to New York. And she pulls out identification. No, I don't need that, ma'am. Oh, of course you do. It's my. She wanted to give it. They didn't want it. And she said, very interesting. She was interviewed just yesterday. A very smart woman. Produced a lot of smart kids, too. Not just Elon, a lot of smart kids. And she was amazed. She left there. They didn't want any information. They didn't want her ID. They didn't want identification. And she said, you know, that's a strange thing. I've been in many countries, and they always want your identification. So, look, we have a country with a massive headache, and it would go a lot longer than headache. It would be a much stronger word than the word headache. And we have to solve this problem because we have a mess on our hands. We got a bunch of cheaters that all they do is think about how they can cheat. Think of this. You know, when I run this election, we have meetings with Susie and Chris and all professionals, respected people, a lot of people. And we talk about strategy like, what do you think we're going to say? Or where are we going to hold a rally? And how much are things going to cost? And what are we doing? You know, in other words, normal. When they meet to find out how can they cheat. And when you think of it, they have to. Because who wants to have policies of open borders where anybody in the world can come in, where you can, and by the way, 90% of the Democrats, not the sleazebags like Schiff and Schumer and crazy Nancy Pelosi, Pocahontas, not those people, but the people that vote, you know, the real Democrats. They actually tell me all the time, I don't know why the hell we can't have voter ID. The real Democrats want to have things like voter ID. They know it's crooked. There's only one reason you don't want voter ID. There's only one reason, and that's to cheat. There is no other reason. There's no other reason. And they do cheat. Isn't this better than my speech?
All right, so tomorrow I will be on Badlands Media sporadically throughout the day, maybe in the evening once we start getting the results in. And beyond that, we'll just see how the day progresses. I'm not going to be doing my normal style podcast. There's an outside chance I will go on Rumble Live tomorrow afternoon. And then Wednesday, we have the live stream for paid subscribers. That will be at 3 p.m. Eastern. I will send out a link to that probably on Wednesday morning. But as for this podcast, I will be back on Thursday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.